Our story begins as a desperate Kim Ji-ho spots a high-voltage sign and realizes it's his only way out. Being chased by suspicious men, he grabs some electrical wires in his hands. The guys grab them tightly, but the protagonist refuses to be taken back. He knows that if he's captured there, everything will be over for good. That's why the young man connects two wires, causing a massive electrical surge in himself. Kim Ji-ho prefers anything to being captured again by those people, so he chooses this fate, crying out in pain as his body is overwhelmed. But it doesn't matter, because the heart of resurrection is inside his chest. Because of this power, he claims he will never perish, no matter what happens. And so begins the story of the Resurrection Boy in the first episode. In this world, there are special hearts that are different from normal ones. This is a mutation that occurs in a small minority of people. Depending on the nature of this heart, they can manifest incredible powers. That's why these people are known as heart mutants. People envied this power and called it a blessing from the gods. Kim Ji-ho, who was lying in the trash, questions if this is really a divine blessing. He then complains about the state he's in because of his heart. Right now, the protagonist just needs to find something to eat because he's starving. Searching through the trash, the young man finds a loaf of bread that was recently thrown away. The boy doesn't even care about the smell and starts devouring the food he found. While he eats, a dog approaches him and watches him with curiosity. Seeing the animal, the protagonist asks if it's hungry too and offers a piece. The little dog accepts the food and licks the young man's skeletal hand without any fear. Suddenly, other dogs surround him, but Kim Ji-ho hears a strange noise in the distance. He then peeks out and wonders if it's the guys from the lab who found him. But it's actually just some delinquents cornering a frightened student. Our hero is relieved to see they're not his pursuers, but just bullies. The aggressors intimidate her, saying she should already know how the world works. Suddenly, Kim Ji-ho notices that the girl is holding a bag of dog food. With that, the skeleton decides to intervene and comes out of his hiding spot to help the young woman. The bullies turn to him and ask who this weird beggar is. Approaching one of them, the young man reveals his face and says he's not a beggar. The blonde delinquent is terrified by his skull-like appearance and starts screaming. With a piece of bone in his hand, he tells the guys to stop screaming and leave. The bullies run away in terror, screaming that they saw a real ghost. Still on the ground and very scared, the student tries to thank him for his help. However, the protagonist just points at her menacingly without saying a word. The girl panics and yells for the creature not to come any closer to her. But instead of approaching her, he just picks up the bag of dog food she dropped. This unexpected action leaves the student completely confused by the situation. The student then warns him that the food he picked up is for dogs. Eating a few kibbles, he apologizes for unintentionally scaring the girl. Kim Ji-ho then asks if she minds if he eats a little of the dog food. The young woman screams in terror upon realizing the creature can talk and runs away from there. Seeing her reaction, the protagonist expected her to run away like everyone else. But the young man doesn't care and can now finally eat the dog food in peace. Hiding, the girl peeks from a distance and wonders what that strange thing was. She questions if it's a person and how someone can live in that condition. Then, a possibility crosses her mind, and she wonders if he's a mutant. The young woman remembers hearing about them and feels bad for being rude. Because of this, she decides to go back and approaches Kim Ji-ho once more. The student then offers him a sandwich that was in her backpack. Very surprised by the gesture, the young man asks if the snack is really for him. She confirms and apologizes for running away, and he thanks her for the food. Holding the snack, he thinks it's the first time he's received food that looks like this. He had seen the wrappers in the trash before, and then takes a big bite of the bread. The taste is so good that the skeleton feels like it's food from the heavens. The vegetables, bread, and meat are so fresh that he could pass on happily right there. Moved by the act of kindness, the protagonist thinks that girl is an angel. She then calls him Mr. Skeleton and curiously asks for his name. He then reveals his name as Ji-ho Kim, and the girl listens to him attentively. The student smiles and introduces herself as Hai Ji-song, saying it's a pleasure to meet him. Then Hai Ji asks how he got like this, and the young man says he's running from the lab. The young woman gets scared and questions what this lab is and why they are chasing him. He confirms that there is a place that captures mutants and they want to take him back. Hai Ji has heard rumors but didn't know it was real, so she asks what they do there. The skeleton pauses with a grim expression before answering her question. He reveals he was used in experiments for 10 years, testing substances on his body. Shocked, the young woman can't believe he went through all that for an entire decade. Kim Ji-ho explains that this happens because of his heart, which always regenerates him. And it's because of this power that his body ended up in this horrible, skeletal state. The girl stares at him with a serious and determined look after hearing his sad story. The protagonist covers his face with his hand, feeling ashamed of his appearance. Suddenly, Hai Ji stands up and tells him to come with her somewhere immediately. She pulls him by the hand and starts running, saying it will be quick, leaving the young man surprised. In shock, the skeleton can't believe she's holding his hand so tightly. He thinks that even with his strange appearance, a girl held him without fear. The protagonist even feels embarrassed that she caught him by surprise like that. But as they run, his hand suddenly detaches from his arm without them noticing. Haiji screams in terror when she sees she's only holding his skeletal hand. The girl panics, but the protagonist calms her down, saying his hand falls off from time to time. He says it reconnects if you line it up right, and the young woman is relieved by this. Suddenly, Kim Ji-oh is in new clothes and even a stylish black wig. Haiji explains she bought them for him because his old ones were too worn out and conspicuous. She says they are cheap clothes, but should last him a good while. The young man is very happy and tells her that he actually loves the new clothes. The feel of the sweater is like new skin, and the wig feels like his real hair. He shouts that they are the best clothes in the world, but the young woman says it's not over yet. The student says his face is still visible and she's gonna cover it with makeup. With a ta-da, she shows the result, which is somewhat bizarre and funny. The girl apologizes as it's her first time putting makeup on bones and it turned out a bit bad. Her cell phone rings suddenly while she covers her face in shame over the result. Haiji looks at the time and realizes she's late for her academy class. She then says goodbye to him, saying it was a pleasure to meet him, and leaves. As she runs, the young woman asks the young man to take care of the puppies for her. Alone, the protagonist thinks about the name of the girl who helped him that day. He watches Ji-sung run away through the streets of the dark city. Surrounded by the dogs, he wonders if she will come back tomorrow to see them again. Kim Ji-oh then reflects that in the lab, he was treated merely as a test animal, and all the people he met while fleeing ran away in fear of his appearance. Sitting with the dogs, he thinks that Ji was the first to treat him like a human. Lying down, he thanks one of the dogs because, without it, he wouldn't have met the girl. As a little dog licks him, the protagonist wonders what name he should give it. He suggests the name Potato, and the little animal seems to really like the idea. Repeating the new name, the young man remembers how delicious the snack he ate was. Kim Ji-oh is sure that the student is an angel for giving him clothes and attention. He gets excited for tomorrow and wonders if he'll see her again if he stays there. But suddenly, a harsh reality hits him, and he realizes something important. The young man realizes that his idea of staying there was a huge mistake. Being hunted, he can't endanger the only person who helped him. Looking back, the protagonist decides that the right thing to do is to leave that place. Under the moonlight, he thinks he needs to go back to the place where he belongs. And so, the skeleton begins to walk alone through the dark streets of the city again. He wanders aimlessly until he gets near a large concrete structure. Very exhausted and weak, the young man feels a sharp pain in his chest and starts to stagger. With no more strength to continue, he finally collapses on the ground next to the trash. Waking up startled, the boy screams upon realizing he's holding a rat. He wonders if he passed out from wandering aimlessly and scolds himself for sleeping anywhere. Sitting on the ground, his stomach growls loudly, and he remembers he's hungry. Fortunately, he was prepared and reveals that he saved some dog food for later. He decides to eat the dog food, imagining it's the sandwich to feel the same taste. The young man eats the food, imagining the ingredients, and is surprised by the taste. But suddenly, the skeleton hears a noise and gets confused by the situation. Potato appears and eats all the food from his hand, leaving him completely desperate. The protagonist then scolds the little dog, telling him he couldn't eat that. Suddenly, the young man stops yelling and notices something very strange happening there. He gets closer and sees Potato happily chewing the food, not caring about anything. The boy wonders how the little dog found him, and an idea pops into his head. With that, he realizes that if the little animal is there, someone else might be too. At that moment, he hears Ji's voice and is thankful for having a skull face. The girl appears furious and asks why he left without saying goodbye to her. Surrounded by the dogs, the young woman says she almost didn't find him and he hides his happiness. She explains that she looked for him all day and followed the scent of the puppies to him. The student scolds him for leaving and reminds him that it's dangerous for him to be so exposed. Kim Ji-oh admits he was afraid of becoming a burden to her and that's why he ran away. Ji then smiles and says she's very happy to have finally found him. Potato licks his face, and the young woman says that even the little dog was worried about him. The girl then shows a bunch of snacks and says they need to eat first. She says that since he only ate one sandwich, she bought several snacks for him. The young woman then prepares some cookies with milk and offers them for the young man to try. Surprised, the young man asks what that is, and the girl explains they are cookies with milk. Holding the tray, he feels a new sensation and says this surpasses yesterday's food. Upon tasting a bit, the protagonist is amazed at the flavor he has never felt before. With tears in his eyes, Kim Ji-oh says the snack is so good he could cry. He says it feels like his brain is melting, and Ji laughs at his exaggerated reaction. But as he drinks a soda, his lost arm begins to regenerate out of nowhere. Shocked, the student asks if it's true, and he shows her the result. The girl watches in silence as the young man's hand rebuilds itself in front of her. She then asks if his healing is always this slow, and if it will take days to finish. The skeleton corrects her, saying that at this rate, it would take years to heal completely. He explains that this only happens if he uses food, and she asks what the other method is. In his thoughts, he knows he needs vital fluids but doesn't want to scare her. So the protagonist fibs, saying the other way only works in the lab. The young woman questions if the lab helped him, and he confirms it was for the tests. He explains that's why they chase him relentlessly, no matter where he goes. At that moment, Haiji understands why he left like that without any warning. Kim Ji-oh confirms and says she doesn't need to be kind anymore because she could get hurt. But suddenly, the student stands up and says they are going to the police station right now. The young man says it's no use because the police will treat him like a monster and try to take him down. The girl tells him not to worry because her older sister is a police officer. She also reveals that her sister is a heart mutant, just like the protagonist. Shocked, the young man asks if her sister is really a mutant, and the young woman confirms it. Even with the news, Kim Ji-oh still seems a bit suspicious of the whole situation. Haiji then asks him to trust her because her sister is a very kind person. The skeleton remains silent for a moment, thinking about whether he should accept her help. At another moment, the student says goodbye to the dogs and says she has to go. The girl says they need to behave because a shelter will call soon to pick them up. The little dog named Potato seems to understand the situation and stands there, drooling with happiness. The protagonist pets the animal and thanks it for helping him once again. With that, the young man decides that this time he won't run away like a coward and will face his fears. He then promises he will come back to visit after everything is over and his life is sorted out. Thus, the two say goodbye to the dogs and set off to find Ji's police officer sister. With his hood on, the boy thinks that in 3 years, this is the first time someone has helped him. He looks at the girl and finds it strange to have someone by his side after so long. As they cross the street, he wonders if he can live without running, but a car appears. Walking with his hood up and more confident, he doesn't notice the danger approaching quickly. The student looks to the side and is completely terrified to see the vehicle at high speed. The car hits him head-on, and the protagonist is thrown violently into the air. With no time to react, the young man hits the ground hard and lies motionless after the strong impact. Suddenly, a man grabs Haiji and shouts to get Kim Ji-oh before anyone sees. Other armed men run towards the protagonist to capture him at once. Without wasting time, 2 goons grab Kim Ji-oh and lift him quickly from the ground. Elsewhere, a mysterious man lights a cigarette with a fancy, golden lighter. He then says with an intimidating look that he finally found that piece of trash. The man orders them to take him away, as he will make him pay for all the trouble he caused. So the black cars speed down the road, taking the young man and the student as hostages. Through the rearview mirror, it's revealed that the protagonist is being dragged by a rope on the asphalt. Tied by the neck, the skeleton suffers while 2 bodies are left behind on the street. Being dragged along the road, the boy regrets that he can't do anything to escape. Desperate, he tries to dig his hands into the ground but ends up hurting himself even more in the process. Kim Ji-oh blames himself because he knows all this trouble is happening because of him. And because of him, the innocent Ji was dragged into this mess for no reason. With his hands torn up, he keeps trying to hold on, but his attempt is useless. The car's speed lifts him into the air and he coughs, unable to breathe properly. The young man then realizes that with his useless ability, he can't do anything to save her. Hopeless, he just begs for someone to show up and help him in this situation. Suddenly, several dogs jump out of the bushes and run towards the black cars. Led by Potato, the dogs bite the rope and start pulling it with great force. Together, they manage to slow down the speed at which the protagonist is being dragged by the car. With everyone's effort, the rope finally snaps, freeing him from the moving vehicle. The car then brakes sharply upon seeing that the skeleton was let go in the middle of the road. With that, the captors turn around and see the pack of dogs surrounding the fallen protagonist. The animals bark and snarl, protecting the young man who is badly hurt on the street's asphalt. Seeing the scene, one of the men gets furious at the dog's interference and curses. With no patience at all, the henchmen get out of the car and prepare to deal with the pack. One of them then complains about the stray dogs and wonders if they're crazy for coming at them. Seeing the dogs protecting him, the protagonist despairs and thinks for them not to do this. But the aggressors attack the dogs with clubs without mercy to get them out of there. Kim Ji-oh laments on the ground as the animals are fighting and getting hurt in his place. With great difficulty, he tries to move and thinks he needs to do something to help them. If the young man doesn't act fast, his canine friends will end up seriously injured because of him. At that moment, an idea comes to his mind and he remembers the blood of the injured on the ground. The skeleton then plans to absorb that blood to regenerate his body a little. With his body completely broken, he pleads to be able to drag himself and reach the liquid. But one of the thugs notices his intention and prepares to stop him from healing. Kim Ji-oh thinks that if he can recover a little, he can change the tide of this fight. Suddenly, he sees one of the dogs lying motionless on the ground and is completely paralyzed. His eyes widen in pure terror at seeing that horrible scene right in front of him. The protagonist recognizes the little dog and whispers the name Potato in total despair. Looking around, he realizes it wasn't just Potato, but all the dogs are down. The captors take down all the dogs, and the protagonist calls their names in desperation. Seeing his friends down, a memory of 10 years of suffering comes back to his mind. For an entire decade, he was kept chained inside that laboratory. Every day, scientists performed terrible experiments on his body without stopping. The same routine of pain repeated, and he couldn't even pass on to rest. That's why one day the young man planned an escape, and by a miracle, he managed to get out. He thought he would finally be happy and that his life would get better after being free. But contrary to what he expected, the world outside was not kind to him at all. People looked down on him and were afraid of his strange, skeletal appearance. To everyone who met him, the protagonist was just a scary monster. However, something changed when his mutant heart began to glow intensely. He remembers Hai-Jai and the puppies, who were the only ones to treat him with kindness. Because of them, the young man decides to fight because they treated him like a real human being. With this new determination, the blood of the injured dogs begins to move on its own. The liquid floats in the air and is drawn towards the protagonist's fallen body. Slowly, his face begins to regenerate, gaining muscle and skin again. All the spilled blood on the ground forms a vortex and is absorbed by his body. At that moment, his skeletal hand begins to gain flesh and returns to its normal form. The healing process accelerates, and his arm and torso are completely reconstructed. And so, the regeneration is complete, and the young man fully regains his human appearance. With that, a final wave of red energy explodes around the fallen protagonist. His eyes open, revealing a red iris and a completely healed face. The young man then stands up at once with his entire body back in human form. He looks at his hands and is surprised to see his body has returned to normal. Kim Ji-ho is happy because he can finally feel his body strong and healthy again. This feeling reminds him of when he was a child and felt alive and full of energy. But suddenly, the young man's joy vanishes, and he realizes a harsh reality. He healed by absorbing the blood of the dogs that were lying around him. The henchmen are frightened and question how his body regenerated so quickly. Their leader then shouts for them not to stand around and to capture him at once. However, before taking a step, Kim Ji-ho hits him with a powerful punch to the face. The force of the blow is so great that the man is thrown backward with great violence. He flies through the air and crashes hard against the door of the parked van. The impact is so strong that the aggressor's body gets stuck in the vehicle's metal. After taking down the leader, the young man kneels and picks up one of the injured puppies. Hugging the animal, he is filled with fury for everything those men did. With a dark look, he says he knows the most painful way for a person to meet their end. The remaining henchmen are terrified, and he asks who will answer his question. The young man's question is about the exact location of the laboratory he escaped from. And so, the Resurrection Boy begins his revenge against those who tormented him. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a bag is removed from the head of Hai-Jai, who has been captured. Kneeling and very confused, the student asks who these people around her are. With that, she gets scared upon realizing she's been taken to a strange and dangerous place. The girl then sees that she is completely surrounded by a group of suspicious men. In a panic, the young woman looks around and wonders where she is and what they want with her. Suddenly, she is terrified to see some bodies on the floor and men with tools. At that moment, a man grabs her by the hair and complains that she's being too loud. He then threatens her, asking if she has any extra lives to be screaming like that. The man shows a photo of Kim Ji-ho and says she was dragged into this for helping him. With a menacing look, he tells her to keep her mouth shut if she doesn't want to meet her end there. Getting closer, he whispers that if 1 or 2 people perish in that place, nobody will care. The student is paralyzed with fear upon hearing that no one cares what happens there. However, the man's cell phone starts ringing in the middle of his intimidation, interrupting him. He answers the call and asks why the person is calling instead of coming to the location. On the other end of the line, the henchman talks about what happened with the skeleton and the dogs. He reports, confused, that the skeleton suddenly transformed into a human being. The leader gets angry and tells his subordinate to speak clearly so he can understand. Hai-Jai overhears the conversation and wonders if the dogs really showed up to help. The boss then realizes the situation and asks if the henchman is saying he lost the target. Furious, he yells at the man, saying he has no idea of the value the young man has. The man curses and threatens his subordinates, saying they will be done for if they don't bring him back. Hanging up the phone, he grabs Hai-Jai and asks where the skeleton he's looking for is. Very angry, the boss yells at the girl, saying she doesn't know how much money he's worth. The student replies that she doesn't know, and the man scoffs, saying of course she doesn't. Pulling out a knife, he threatens her and says he'll make a few holes in her to see if she remembers. The young woman remembers that Kim Ji-ho warned her, but she was a fool and didn't listen properly. With the knife at her neck and crying, she wonders what she should do in that situation. Suddenly, the aggressor is interrupted by a noise and looks to the side, startled. One of his henchmen flies through the air and crashes to the ground, defeated in seconds. In an instant, all the other men are thrown to the ground and lie motionless in pain. At that moment, a mysterious figure appears at the room's door and faces the thugs. The leader turns around and is confused, not understanding what is happening in that place. With his hair covering his face, the protagonist stares at the men, and the boss asks who he is. One of the henchmen approaches and calls him a beggar, asking who the heck he is. Kim Ji-ho then grabs him by the neck with surprising strength and lifts him into the air. The man struggles and is shocked by the strength that this thin boy possesses. With a look full of hatred, the young man reveals the reason he is there is for revenge. He says that because of them, all the dogs who were his friends are gone. The boss then yells for his men to attack the intruder and finish him off at once. Other henchmen run towards him, but he doesn't even move and takes a punch to the neck. The blow doesn't affect the young man, who maintains a calm and serious expression on his face. With that, he retaliates with a powerful punch that hits the aggressor's chin squarely. The man flies backward from the impact and cries out in pain as he spits a little blood. Taking advantage of the distraction, one of the henchmen grabs him from behind and yells that he's got him. Two other men hold him and start hitting him relentlessly to immobilize him. Even injured and bleeding, the protagonist faces them with his red eyes full of fury. Using his strength, he ducks and throws one of the henchmen over his body with full force. The leader and the other men are shocked to see the boy's superhuman strength. Fallen on the ground, Kim Ji-ho slowly gets up and faces the aggressors with a cold gaze. He then asks if they were sent by the Hermes laboratory to capture him. Hai-ji is shocked to hear the lab's name and the confirmation of her suspicions. The student recognizes him and wonders if that boy is really the Mr. Ji-ho she met. The leader finally understands the situation and realizes that boy was the skeleton. He remembers being warned that he might not recognize him if he regenerated. Suddenly, one of the henchmen shoots at him, and the young man ironically thanks him for the shot. With a weapon in his hand, the boss thanks him for coming back on his own. With a wicked smile, he orders his men to grab all the weapons they were given. With that, the henchmen obey, and they all draw their pistols to fire at the protagonist. The leader yells not to hesitate and to shoot for real, as they can earn more money. And so, they all fire at the young man so that he can't regenerate again. The leader screams for them not to stop, to keep firing without mercy at the boy, who is struck by several rounds. With a pained expression, the boy feels each shot piercing his body without pity. He feels his flesh being torn as the bullets violently pass through his back. The projectiles don't stop and now shatter his bones into pieces with continuous impacts. With his lungs pierced, the protagonist can't even breathe properly from so much pain. Seeing the horrible scene, Hai-ji screams desperately for them to stop firing at the young man. After so many shots, the boy finally falls to the ground and one of the henchmen celebrates his fall. The protagonist's body lies motionless on the floor, full of bullet holes and blood everywhere. But suddenly, the young man's hand starts to move on its own, indicating he's still alive. The blood spilled on the floor begins to move and is drawn towards the boy's fingers. Not only his, but the blood of the fallen henchman also moves towards Kim Ji-ho. At that moment, his mutant heart begins to glow intensely inside his chest. One of the henchmen yells for the boss upon seeing one of his comrades being lifted off the ground. The protagonist starts to get up on his own, and the henchman yells that he's coming back to life. With that, the leader is terrified and says the young man is rising like a zombie. Ignoring the injuries, Kim Ji-ho's body contorts, and the blood completely envelops him. The boss then yells for his men not to stand there, and to fire at him once more. Even with the new shots, the boy feels each bullet entering his body without stopping. He realizes the shots are not just piercing him but blowing him to pieces. But even with all the damage received, his body continues to regenerate without stopping. But he realizes the pain isn't as strong as he imagined it would be. His body continues to regenerate, and he remembers what he has gone through before. He recalls enduring horrible experiments with liquids in his body. The young man also remembers when he was crushed by heavy machinery in the lab. And he knows that all those experiences and tortures were much more painful than this. With that, he approaches the boss and hits him with a powerful punch to the face. The impact of the blow is so strong that the man is thrown far away with great violence. For the protagonist, something like simple firearms is not scary at all. He then affirms to himself that he can take this kind of pain all day long. The other henchmen are shocked to see their boss defeated in such a way. Without wasting time, the boy advances and hits another aggressor with a precise punch. The man is thrown against the wall and spits blood from the force of the attack he received. The others are paralyzed because they didn't expect him to be so strong. But what really drives him crazy is remembering the dogs that protected him. In his mind, he sees the fallen animals and is filled with uncontrollable fury. The young man remembers the little dog Potato, who helped him and became his loyal friend. And the fact that he couldn't protect them makes him completely furious. One of the henchmen tries to run, but the protagonist stops him with a quick kick. Desperate, the leader grabs Hai-ji and yells for the boy not to come any closer. Even with the threat, he doesn't stop and hits the boss with another punch to the face. The protagonist continues to punch the boss's face with great force and without mercy. With a face full of hatred, he unleashes all his anger on the man who captured him. The young man laments that he can never see his dog friends again, and for that, he attacks with everything he has. The force of the attack is so great that even the wall behind the aggressor cracks. On the ground and badly injured, the leader of the henchmen looks at the boy with fear in his eyes. He can't believe the superhuman strength that this thin young man possesses. Completely desperate, the boss begs for the boy to spare his life. But with a cold look, the protagonist says it's now too late to be sorry. Without hesitation, he lands a powerful kick to the face of the man on the ground. The leader screams in pain and spits more blood from the impact of the devastating kick. However, the young man doesn't stop and continues to punch the aggressor's face relentlessly. He takes out all his frustration on the man who hurt his only friends. The sequence of blows continues, and the boss has no chance to defend himself. With a disfigured face, the leader finally falls unconscious on the room's floor. After everything, the protagonist looks at his hand, which is covered in blood. He then stares at the fallen body of the man who captured him without showing any emotion. With all the henchmen defeated, the room falls into a frightening silence. The young man takes a deep breath and seems exhausted after fighting all those men. Haiji calls his name and watches him in silence, completely shocked by the scene. Ignoring everything around him, the boy just turns and starts to walk away from there. He takes a few slow, staggering steps towards the girl who is on the floor. Approaching the student, he looks at her with an expression of exhaustion and relief. Haiji asks if he's sure he's okay, as he was hit by many shots. Suddenly, the young man faints, and the girl hugs him, saying she's happy he's alive. With tears in his eyes, Kim Jio clings to her and begins to cry on her shoulder. The young woman comforts him and repeats that she's so relieved he survived the attack. With a trembling voice, the protagonist says the dogs were lost trying to save him. And he confesses that he was very scared that she would also be lost because of him. That's why the young man is thankful that she is alive and well after all that mess. The student looks at him and asks why he is thanking her in this situation. With her hand on his back, she comforts him as he lets out all his pain. At that moment, the young woman says that she's the one who should be thanking him for everything he did. Elsewhere, the police arrive, and a detective orders them to take the suspects away. With that, the leader of the henchmen is handcuffed by a police officer and taken to the station. Seeing the scene, one of the officers questions how so much damage was caused by a gang fight. Hiding, they watch the police, and the girl asks if it's okay that they aren't being investigated. Jai explains that her sister told her to stay away because things get complicated with mutants. She then says that since her sister will take care of everything, they should just leave for now. Alone in the forest, the student starts to cry loudly, relieved that it's all over. With that, the protagonist also cries and covers his face with the hands, remembering the dogs. Kneeling on the ground, the protagonist apologizes to the dogs that were lost because of him. With great sadness, he calls out the names of each of his canine friends who are gone. Crying, Haiji hugs one of the animals and says that all of this is her fault alone. The girl laments because the dogs risked everything for her, who only gave them a little food. Angrily, the young man bites his finger and yells that it's not her fault at all. Frightened, the student asks what he's doing with that strange expression. He then reveals that if he can heal with blood, maybe he can bring them back too. With that, a drop of his special blood drips from his finger, and he prepares for the act. The liquid then moves strangely and starts to create a bizarre shape in the air. But the boy is surprised to see that his body is healing too quickly again. Not caring about the pain, he bites his finger harder to continue the process. Haiji then stops him and tells him to stop, because the dogs would be even sadder. Confused, the young man asks if they passed on hating him for not being able to protect them. The girl denies it and asks if he doesn't know how much those dogs truly loved him. She then reveals that the animals were always wary of people but liked him a lot. Surprised, the protagonist reflects on the mistrust the dogs had of humans. The student confirms and says they had many scars from mistreatment all over their bodies. The young man regrets it, as he had no idea of the suffering they went through before meeting him. That's why she says that if he hurts himself and blames himself, it will break the dogs' hearts too. Hearing the girl's words, he just remains silent, hugging the body of his friend. The student smiles and says the fact that they approached him without hesitation means something, and that they probably felt that the young man was in a situation similar to theirs. Moved by her words, the protagonist thanks her for all the support he received, but suddenly, the two hear a crying sound coming from nearby in the forest. To their surprise, one of Potato's puppies appears, and the girl is happy that he's alive. The little puppy then starts wagging its tail and walks towards the protagonist. Haiji watches the scene and says the little puppy is looking directly at Mr. Gio. With that, the young man asks the puppy if it doesn't hate him, since everyone was lost because of him. In response, the puppy just licks the boy's hand, showing care and affection. Seeing the animal's reaction, the student says the little puppy seems to like him. The puppy then falls asleep in his arms, and the girl says he must be very exhausted. The young woman then wonders what she should do, as she can't leave a newborn alone. But she also thinks about the young man and knows the guys from the lab are not ordinary thugs. So the student steps away and says she's gonna call her sister to resolve the situation. On the phone, she tells her sister that she's handled things and asks where they should go. And so the two walk through the dark city with the young man holding the puppy in his arms. After walking for a while, they finally arrive at a large apartment building. Inside the place, he is surprised by the house, and she invites him to come in and make himself at home. However, the protagonist hesitates and asks if it's okay for someone as dangerous as him to enter. The young woman then smiles and says he risked his life to protect her, so he isn't dangerous. The girl also says that her sister wants to meet him because she's investigating a case. She explains that the case seems to be related to the laboratory that was chasing him. That's why Haiji insists he can come in without fear, because everything will be fine now. Looking at himself in the mirror, The young man sees himself with the puppy in his arms and is very confused. Suddenly, he lets out a scream of panic, scaring the girl who doesn't understand anything. Kim Ji-ho then grabs the young woman and yells that his face is back with cheeks and lips. He explains that his face hadn't regenerated since he was just a child. In the laboratory, the regeneration was very slow, and they only performed experiments on him. Touching his own reflection, he finally realizes what his true appearance is. The student drinks some water and says his story gets more shocking by the minute. She then comments that now that he's healed, he doesn't look like an old man and asks his age. The young man reflects for a bit and says it's been a long time since he's thought about it. He calculates that he entered the lab at 7 years old and escaped 10 years after everything. The young woman spits out her water upon realizing he is 17 years old and is very surprised. With that, she yells that they are the same age and asks why he let her call him Mr. Embarrassed, the boy confesses that he was just happy she was treating him like a human being. Hearing the confession, the young woman is speechless and just stares at him in silence for a moment. In her thoughts, she finds his situation a little sad but also cute at the same time. Then Haiji suggests they call each other by their names and tells him to wash up for dinner. While he gets ready to eat, the little puppy enjoys the food in its bowl. Haiji says it's just rice with an egg and soy sauce because she doesn't know how to cook well. But the young man shouts that this is the best food he's eaten in many years. The young woman then says her sister won't be able to come today due to an unforeseen event. After they finish eating, the protagonist is satisfied with the delicious meal. With that, she points to the sofa and tells him to sleep there that night. The young man says the floor would have been fine, but the girl insists and gives him a blanket. She then says goodnight, saying she needs to do her homework in her room. And so the student enters her room and closes the door, leaving him alone in the living room. Alone in the living room, the boy observes the place with an expression of admiration. He is impressed by the comfort and modernity of that apartment. Looking at the television, he wonders how a device can be so big and thin. He also sees flowers and realizes how different this place is from the laboratory. Lying on the sofa, the young man is surprised by how soft and comfortable it is. Meanwhile, the puppy also enjoys the food the young woman left for him. The little puppy eats everything and seems very happy and satisfied with the meal. Suddenly, the protagonist hears a noise and turns to see what happened. He then sees the puppy choking on the floor and panics at the situation. Desperate, the young man screams the puppy's name, not knowing what to do to help it. Without a second thought, he runs towards the puppy to try to help it. Very carefully, the boy tries to help the little animal that is suffering on the floor. But to the protagonist's relief, the puppy recovers and looks at him, not understanding anything. With that, he realizes it was just a scare and that the puppy was fine the whole time. Finally, at ease, the two fall asleep together on the soft and comfortable living room sofa. The young man then hugs the puppy and comments on how good it feels to hold something so warm and fluffy. He asks the little animal if it's also enjoying this new place. Since he's Potato's son, the protagonist suggests the name French Fry for the puppy. The puppy seems to like the idea, and so its new name is decided as Fry. Falling asleep next to his new friend, the young man thinks that this is true happiness. He remembers the delicious meal he ate and how welcomed he felt by the young woman. The boy also recalls the warm bath he took and how relaxing it was. For the first time in years, he was able to wash with warm water in a safe place. And on top of everything, he can also sleep in a soft and comfortable place like this. But as he sleeps, the protagonist knows that this peace will not last forever. He has the sad awareness that all this happiness can be easily lost. Suddenly, in his nightmare, he sees all the prisoners from the laboratory running. Leading the escape, the skeleton shouts for everyone to run to the exit. However, armed soldiers appear and say they cannot lose those mutants. A large explosion occurs, and all the escapees are thrown far away by the impact. The ground is destroyed, and the prisoners fall injured, unable to get up anymore. One of the soldiers then points his weapon at the injured, preparing to fire. Suddenly, a weapon fires a powerful energy blast at the fleeing prisoners. With that, one of the soldiers is hit head-on by a large fiery explosion. The other guards are completely stunned by the unexpected attack. At that moment, one of the escapees uses her powers and creates a barrier of ice. The girl then screams desperately for Kim Ji-ho, who is on the ground, to wake up. Another prisoner tries to help the skeleton, who is trapped in strange branches. With a determined look, the young man struggles to free his friend from the trap. The skeletal protagonist looks back at him, still seeming confused and dazed. The ice girl yells at him to hurry because the exit is right in front of them. He then extends his hand and is pulled by her to continue the escape from the laboratory. The young man remembers that they escaped with great difficulty, but got separated in the end. Back in the present, the protagonist sleeps with a very sad expression on his face. He thinks that somewhere, his friends from the lab might be suffering again. That's why he swears he will never again allow this little piece of peace he found to be taken from him. The boy's hand then begins to glow with a red energy of pure determination. Inside him, his mutant heart pulses intensely with his new goal in mind. With that, if anyone tries to interfere with his happiness, he will show no mercy. The young man's eyes open with an intense glow because he won't let this go. Suddenly, a very loud scream echoes through the street, waking the protagonist from his sleep. Outside, someone stumps heavily on the ground, approaching the girl's apartment. Desperate, the young man runs down the street, calling Fry's name over and over to find him. With many tears in his eyes, he wonders where the little puppy has gotten to. But it was all just a dream, and he sees Ji getting ready for school. The young woman says her sister will probably only be back at night as she's very busy with work. With that, she says goodbye, and the protagonist thinks that going to school seems like fun. However, as the girl is about to leave, the puppy starts scratching the door and whimpering. Not understanding, the student asks the little dog what's wrong with him. They realize the animal isn't sick, and Kim Ji-ho suggests that he wants to go for a walk. He decides to take the small animal for a walk, but the young woman needs to leave soon. Ji then questions if he'll be okay since he's still being pursued by those people. The young man reassures her, saying no one will recognize him now that he has a face. With a more relieved look, the student agrees that this is great news. She then tells him to put a leash on Fry and points to the second drawer. Once outside, the protagonist has a lot of trouble leashing the puppy. The young man asks the little animal not to take off the leash and gets very stressed about it. Throwing himself on the ground, the puppy struggles, and the boy wonders if it's bothering him. Seeing Fry's distress, he questions if he put the leash on too tightly. The scene reminds him of when he also had something tied to his body in the past. In his memory, he sees himself tied to a chair while his body was burned. He thinks there's nothing he can do, but a bully appears and kicks the poor puppy. With that, he takes the leash off the puppy and apologizes for bothering him. But suddenly, the young man realizes the puppy has escaped and goes into a total panic. The protagonist then starts running desperately through the streets, shouting Fry's name. With tears in his eyes, the boy shouts, asking where the puppy went. And so begins the 5th episode of the story with the disappearance of little Fry. Kim Ji-ho runs all over the neighborhood and asks if anyone has seen his friend around. Desperate, he even looks inside a trash can but doesn't find him. The young man also looks under a car but only finds some rats. Already out of strength, the protagonist leans against a trash can, losing hope. He wonders what he will do to find Fry and if something bad will happen to him. In his thoughts, the boy imagines the puppy being hit by a car. Or worse, he thinks of mean people chasing the little animal to hurt it. Devastated, he remembers that he promised to protect the puppy the night before. After searching for a long time, he ends up stopping next to a school wall. Looking at the yard, he sees Fry near the field watching a soccer game. The little puppy seems to be enjoying the game, and the young man shouts his name in relief. Running towards him, he wonders if the animal followed Ji's scent there. But a man with a bat in his hand stares at him with a very confused expression. Paying no attention to the stranger, the protagonist runs right past him. The man is impressed and wonders how that boy can be so fast. Kim Ji-ho shouts the puppy's name, but the man with the bat also shouts for him to wait. Arriving at the schoolyard, he sees several students playing soccer on the lawn. Other students are talking and walking around, enjoying the sunny day at school. Sitting on the bleachers, some boys gather to watch videos on a cell phone. Hiding behind a tree, the protagonist observes and thinks that this is his school. He then notices that everyone seems to be having fun but overhears a strange conversation. The students are talking about a rumor that mutants originated in a laboratory. One of them shows that the reward for a wanted mutant is 1 billion won. Hearing this, the young man realizes how outsiders see mutants as prizes. So he decides he needs to be careful and find Fry to get out of there quickly. At that moment, the puppy runs happily across the yard, oblivious to the danger around. Elsewhere, some girls are recording a dance challenge and watching the result. The friends praise one of them, saying she is very pretty and talented at dancing. With a smile, the young woman thanks them and says they are also very pretty. Suddenly, little Fry runs towards them and the students are surprised. One of the girls picks up the puppy and says he is very cute and adorable. With that, they decide to take a picture with the puppy to post on social media. But upon seeing the phone screen, one of them sees the young man's reflection and screams in fear. The young women call him a stalker and ask if he was taking pictures of them. Behind the tree, Kim Ji-ho apologizes, but one of them calls him a weird creep. He explains that he didn't mean to scare them and was just looking for Fry. But the girls change their attitude and start complimenting the young man's appearance, finding him very handsome. One of them notices his uniform and deduces he must be a freshman or a transfer student. The young woman then asks if he's in the recording and invites him to join the video with them. Her friend scolds her, but she doesn't care, and the young man refuses, saying he can't be recorded. Unfazed by the refusal, the student asks the boy to give her his Instagram profile. She then explains that she will tag him in the video so her followers can get to know him too. Her friends are shocked because it's the first time they've seen Minjeong ask for a boy's contact info. Confused, the protagonist wonders what Instagram is and hears that you can get followers with it. The girl named Minjeong thinks he's not bad at all and that his shyness makes him even cuter. She thinks he's playing hard to get, but the young man reveals he doesn't have a social media account. The student is completely speechless upon hearing the young man's unexpected answer. With that, he apologizes and politely and a bit awkwardly declines the young woman's offer. Her friends can't believe that Minjeong just got rejected for the first time. Furious, the girl thinks he's playing hard to get and that his defense is impenetrable. The young man then takes Fry from her arms and says the puppy is his and he needs to leave. Holding the puppy, he apologizes and promises he will never lose sight of him again. Suddenly, a mean-looking bully watches the scene with a look of pure fury. He then asks his friends who that new guy is talking to the girls. One of his friends asks if that's not his girl, and the bully confirms it angrily. The bully named Taegu furiously asks who the new guy hitting on Minjeong is. Very angry, he can't believe the guy is flirting with the girl right in front of him. Then the aggressor grabs a soccer ball from another student, who is left confused. His friend tries to stop him and says that last time he broke someone's nose like this. But he doesn't care and kicks the ball with all his might towards the protagonist. The ball flies like a missile. The bully says that if it hits someone, it's not his problem. At that moment, the projectile gets very close to hitting the protagonist and the puppy head-on. His eyes widen in surprise as he sees the ball coming at high speed towards him. He then realizes he has no time to dodge the attack and needs to protect the puppy. So the young man hugs little Fry tightly so that nothing bad happens to him. And so, the ball hits him right in the face with a violent impact that startles the girls. One of Minjeong's friends approaches, concerned, and asks if he's okay after the blow. Suddenly, a little blood starts dripping on the ground, and the girl panics at the scene. The bully then approaches and pretends it was an accident, apologizing sarcastically. He says it was a mistake and that he almost got hit too, but Minjeong doesn't seem convinced. With a victorious smile, the aggressor tells the young man to be more careful next time. But Kim Jio says the puppy almost got hurt and, with a cold look, tells him to apologize. The bully starts laughing and points to the young man's nose, saying he's bleeding a lot. However, he stops laughing when he remembers Minjeong is watching and he needs to keep up his image. Changing his attitude, he asks if the boy is okay and suggests he go to the nurse's office. The young man says he's fine, but Fry almost got hurt and tells him to be more careful. With a fake smile, the bully apologizes and the protagonist says it's okay. Saying goodbye, he turns to leave, and the aggressor's friend says he held back. Very angry, Taegu tells his friend to find out who that guy is because he hates him. Alone, the protagonist thinks he was very shocked by the idea of having lost Fry. But he reflects that thanks to the puppy, he was able to see a school and meet other young people. With a smile, he finds it all very fun and wonders if he would make friends there. Suddenly, someone calls him friend, and the young man turns around, not understanding the situation. The bully approaches with a fake smile and apologizes for what happened earlier. He then says that since they are in the same grade now, they can be considered friends. So, the aggressor invites him to get some bread, and the protagonist is shocked by the offer. The young man is mesmerized by the idea of eating bread, as he hasn't eaten anything like it in a long time. Surprised, he asks if the bully is really going to buy bread, and he pulls him to go. The boy then asks if there will be something for Fry, and the aggressor promises to buy everything for him. As they walk, the bully thinks he must be hungry for trying to act cool. But suddenly, the aggressor lifts his foot to attack the protagonist from behind. With a powerful kick, he hits him hard, and the young man cries out in pain from the blow. Fallen on the ground with Fry, he realizes that other bullies have appeared to surround him. One of them mocks him for falling into such an obvious trap for some bread. Another aggressor then asks his friends if the guy is slow or something. The aggressor then says he will feed him enough, but it will actually be a knuckle sandwich. Surrounded by the gang, the leader calls him a little weakling and starts provoking him with a smile. Taegu gets furious with the young man's calmness and asks why he is acting so strangely. Very angry, the aggressor then yells and questions why he was hitting on Minjeong. He threatens the protagonist, saying a guy like him would cry with just one good punch to the face. Grabbing his collar, the gang leader curses him and says that bringing a puppy to school is disgusting. With his hand on his face, the young man laments because he thought the bully really wanted to be his friend. Kim Jio then apologizes and says that if he made him uncomfortable, he can leave without any trouble. But the other aggressors stop him and ask where he thinks he's going so easily. With a cold look, the protagonist tells them to get out of the way because they are scaring little Fry. One of the henchmen gets angry and says the mutt takes after his owner and asks who he's barking at. Suddenly, the young man hits him with a punch to the face and the man flies backward, bleeding heavily. Fallen on the ground, the aggressor is unconscious and his friends wonder why Jian is there. Taegu is shocked and can't believe what he saw, wondering how he sent Jian flying like that. Furious, the other henchmen advance on the protagonist to attack him all at once. But the boy is unfazed by the situation and faces the aggressors with a calm and serious look. His eyes shine with a cold determination as he prepares for the fight that is about to begin. At that moment, his mutant heart pulses with full force, releasing all its hidden power. With a quick and powerful kick, he hits another bully squarely and easily knocks him to the ground. The protagonist then dodges their attacks and takes down the other aggressors one by one without difficulty. Finally, the protagonist lands a powerful punch on Taegu's face, who looks at him in shock. With incredible strength, he lifts him into the air and throws him hard against the brick wall. The impact is so strong that the aggressor's head cracks the wall, leaving him stunned. With a cold look, the young man warns that he already told him to stop because Fry was scared. Taegyu's friends are terrified to see the wall broken by the force of the blow. Without a second thought, the bullies run away in terror, calling the young man a monster. The gang leader can't believe the wall cracked and that it makes no sense. With that, he realizes he is completely done for and that one punch would break his bones. Completely terrified, the aggressor wonders if he messed with the wrong person. Desperate, the bully bows and begs for forgiveness, saying he will never do it again. He then tries to explain himself and shows the young man a picture of his puppy named Bobby. The protagonist wonders if he is a good person for also having a cute puppy. Meanwhile, the aggressor continues to apologize and beg to be forgiven just this once. But suddenly, the boy's stomach growls, and he says he's hungry from using his strength. The bully is confused, wondering how the young man can be hungry in this situation. He then thinks the new guy is pretending to forgive him to demand food in return. Meanwhile, Haiji is in class, and so ends the 5th episode of the young man's story. In the 6th episode, the bully takes the protagonist to the school's convenience store. With a bunch of food on the table, the boy thanks him, and Taegyu tells him to enjoy it. From a distance, the aggressor watches the boy eat everything and seems to be planning something again. The boy eats all the bread and asks the puppy if the food is tasty for him too. Taegyu then observes and wonders what kind of guy he is, as he seems strong but acts like a loser. He remembers how the young man sent one of his friends flying with a single punch. The bully also remembers that he cracked a wall, and that makes no sense in his head. So, the aggressor decides to take special measures and calls someone for help. On the other end of the line, a man named Yonkil answers and asks what's going on. Desperate, the bully begs for the boss to help him because he's completely done for. The man gets angry and asks why he's calling just because he got beat up by some random guy. Crying, the aggressor begs for his boss to help him for the first and last time in this situation. The gang leader explains to another person that his junior got beat up and wants help with revenge. In a bored tone, he says he'll be passing by anyway and tells the bully to wait. Taegyu is very happy and thanks him, as his boss has business near the school today. With a wicked smile, he thinks the protagonist is now done for and has no escape. But suddenly, the young man calls him and offers some of the bread he was eating. The aggressor is confused and the protagonist says he feels bad eating all of it by himself. Nervously, he hands more food and drinks to the boy, who thanks him, very happy with the gesture. Seeing the young man feed the puppy, he wonders how someone so kind can be so strong. The scene of the boy with the puppy leaves the bully even more confused about everything that happened. Suddenly, he remembers that the young man's hand got injured when he punched the wall earlier. With that, he realizes the boy not only has super strength but also heals very quickly. He remembers reading that heart mutants can have different abilities. So, the bully puts the pieces together and asks if the young man is a heart mutant. Kim Ji-ho chokes on his drink and denies it, but his desperate reaction gives him away instantly. Terrified, Taegyu realizes it's the first time he's seen a real mutant in his life. But he wonders if a heart mutant wouldn't be someone very dangerous to have around. With that, he thinks his boss might end up getting beat up for nothing if he comes to fight this boy. On the other end of the line, the boss is surprised and asks if the guy next to him is really a mutant. The aggressor confirms it and says he's dangerous, that it would be better to forget the idea of revenge. However, the boss says this is even better and tells the bully to hold him there no matter what. Satisfied, the protagonist says he's eaten enough and gets up to leave. In a panic, Taegyu asks why he's leaving already, as there's still time before the break is over. With a gentle smile, the young man confirms and says he really needs to go back home now. The bully thinks he needs to hold him there by any means until his boss finally arrives at the school. So he gets the idea to suggest they skip class to go hang out and have fun. And so the aggressor takes the protagonist to an arcade called Game Land to pass the time. Arriving there, the young man is amazed by the place, and Taegyu asks if it's his first time there. With a flushed face, he confirms, as he didn't even know places like this existed in the world. The protagonist walks all over the place and finds it incredible how everything there seems new to him. Suddenly, he sees a claw machine and recognizes a doll just like the one Haiji has in her bag. The bully is shocked and wonders what the heck this boy has been doing his whole life. The aggressor teaches him how to play and tells him to get out of the way, because he'll show him how it's done. Taegyu then controls the claw and explains that you just have to grab the doll and lift it to win. To the protagonist's surprise, the claw manages to grab the doll on the first try and drops it. With the prize in his hands, the young man is very happy to have the same doll as Haiji. He says the arcade is fun, and the bully agrees, as he can stall his boss this way. With that, he points to a karaoke place and asks if the young man has ever been to one. Inside the booth, the aggressor explains that Yu sings songs there and he'll help him choose one. Kim Ji-ho says he doesn't know any songs, but the bully insists he shouldn't be shy. The young man then starts singing a children's song about a picnic with his mom. Taegyu is shocked and asks why he's singing that and if he's putting on a show. The protagonist asks if he can't sing that and reveals it's the only song he knows. He explains that his mother taught it to him before he was separated from his family when he was 7. The bully is speechless upon hearing that the young man hasn't had a normal life since childhood. Looking at the boy, he wonders if all heart mutants are like that. With a strange expression, the aggressor thinks the boy is messing with his feelings. Changing his attitude, he throws some money and tells the boy to follow him because he'll show him a new world. In another game, the two have fun on a drum machine and the bully yells at him to hit it faster. In a fighting game, Taegu accuses him of using tricks, but the young man doesn't even know how to play properly. After a long time, the two get tired in a dance game, and the protagonist even falls to the floor. The bully calls him a rookie, and the boy just laughs, saying the game is hard but fun. Outside, the bully comments that they played like crazy and he's very tired. The young man says it was the first time he had so much fun, and Taegu brags about taking him there. Suddenly, the aggressor's cell phone vibrates, and he is confused, not knowing who is calling. With a smile, he answers the phone and wonders who could be calling him at this hour. On the other end of the line, his boss curses him and yells at him to answer the phone faster. Desperate, the bully remembers that he forgot about the boss because he was having so much fun. He even remembers that they took pictures together and wonders if he's a complete idiot. In the photos, the two make funny poses and even a heart with their hands like good friends. Walking down the street, he sees his boss and his men standing and waiting for them up ahead. The whole gang is gathered in a dark alley and seems ready for a big fight. The bully apologizes to the boss and lies that the young man is not a mutant. The gang leader asks if he's kidding, and the aggressor begs for forgiveness again. Suddenly, Taegu looks at his boss and realizes this is no longer about the boy. He remembers the protagonist at the karaoke and how the puppy is his only family. With his hand on his face, the aggressor thinks the young man's situation is very sad and moving. That's why he understands his feelings and remembers his own puppy named Bobby. Taegu cries thinking about his dog and says he almost took down his friends when they messed with him. Then he realizes it's not for the boy, but for the puppy who is his only family. With that, the bully is filled with determination to protect the young man and the little puppy. Without a second thought, he steps in front of the boss and takes a powerful punch to the face. On the ground, the bully trembles in pain after taking a hard punch from his boss. The gang leader then grabs him by the hair and calls his name very angrily. Angrily, he asks if he looks like he's kidding and demands to know where the mutant is. The aggressor starts making up a story to protect the protagonist he met. One of the henchmen curses him and says he doesn't understand the situation he's gotten himself into. Other men with masks and weapons prepare for what might happen next. The boss yells that he gathered the whole family just to capture that one guy. Desperate, Taegu yells that it's a misunderstanding and that he spent the whole day with the young man. He lies, saying the young man is a loser who passed out after 2 games at the arcade. With a forced smile, he says the boy is a failure and apologizes for the trouble. The boss stares at him in silence, and Taegu confirms that the young man is no longer there with them. With his arm on his shoulder, the boss asks if he got upset about being hit. He then says that when the bully lies, it's written all over his face. The gang leader then asks him to give the reason why he suddenly changed his story. Taegu tries to warn him that this is not a human and that the world is dangerous because of them. But the boss starts laughing and asks if he was worried they might lose the fight. With a bloody nose, the bully denies it and tries to insist that the young man is very dangerous. The leader then raises his hand and says he'll give him 5 million for the mutant. He says he's generous and has already prepared a broker to handle the mutant trade. Shocked, the aggressor realizes his boss is talking about human trafficking. He remembers seeing on the internet about crimes involving the kidnapping of heart mutants. Taegu thought it was just a rumor, but his boss was doing the same thing he saw in the videos. With a nervous smile, he insists the young man is nothing and begs the boss to believe him. But the leader gets angry and hits him with a powerful kick, sending the aggressor flying. The bully flies through the air and crashes against the wall, feeling immense pain from the strong impact. With his face full of pain and blood, he can't even breathe properly after the blow. Furious, the boss yells that he's let a lot of things slide, but this was the limit for him. He then steps on the aggressor's head and yells that he's making him very frustrated with everything. Impatient, the leader orders his men to beat him until he finally tells the truth. With that, the henchmen start kicking the bully on the ground without any mercy. He feels every blow hitting his body as he curls up on the ground to try to protect himself. Elsewhere, some bullies beat up a boy who screams for them not to do it. On the ground and badly injured, the young man begs for the aggressors to stop their cowardly act. Suddenly, a group appears and asks who told them to intimidate a friend like that. Terrified, the aggressors apologize and run away in fear of the group that just arrived. One of the young men then lifts him up and calls him by his full name, Joe Taegu, and he responds. In a memory, his older brother scolds him for getting beat up even though he's from their dojo. He remembers how the boss seemed loyal and a good fighter, which is why he admired him so much. Back in the present, the bully continues to be beaten by the henchman without being able to defend himself. The aggressor just wanted to be like his older brothers because he thought they were very cool. A henchman says the bully isn't talking, but the boss knows he knows him and can see the lie. The boss then squats down and says Taegu has loyalty, and that's very cool of him. but he warns him that selling the young man to a broker is no joke. The leader explains that if he sells him alone, he'll only get 2 or 3 million at most. He then says loyalty is useless if his body gets wrecked and asks for a chain. The gang leader remembers the aggressors said he wanted to live a cool and stylish life. He then says that making a lot of money shamelessly is the coolest way to live. With a wicked smile, the boss proposes that the two of them live a cool life together. Taegu looks at him and apologizes, but says his boss is not being cool at all right now. He bravely states that the gang leader is being very foolish at that moment. Lying on the ground, the bully regrets what he said and wonders what he was thinking. The boss is furious at his audacity and says so that's how it's going to be. In a panic, the aggressor begs for forgiveness and says his words came out wrong. Impatient, the gang leader tells him to drop and prepares to deliver the final blow. But suddenly, a hand grabs the boss's fist and stops the attack from happening. Kim Ji-ho analyzes the chain and says it's as thick as a finger and is rough. He then warns that if the boss hits him with that, the scar will last for a long time. The henchmen are confused and wonder who this guy is that appeared out of nowhere. Taegu is shocked by his appearance and asks how the protagonist managed to find him. The young man explains that he came looking for him because he wasn't coming back to the arcade. Taegu, on the ground, warns the young man to run because these guys are dangerous. But the bully confesses that he was actually the one who called those men there. And he even reveals that he told him the protagonist was a heart mutant. The aggressor closes his eyes tightly, remembering why he did all that. He confesses that he did it all out of anger for being beat up and apologizes to the boy. Kim Ji-ho then asks why the aggressor is getting beat up over something like that. At that moment, the gang leader stares at the protagonist with a very intimidating look. Seeing his boss, the bully is terrified of what might happen to the young man. One of the henchmen then raises a baseball bat and prepares to attack the boy. With a look of pure malice, the man prepares to strike with all his might. The protagonist grits his teeth and braces for the impact to protect the puppy. Suddenly, other aggressors join in and start attacking him with various weapons. The blows hit the young man squarely, and the sound of the impact echoes through the dark alley. Seeing its owner being attacked, Little Fry starts barking furiously at the men. Being held back, Taegu screams desperately as he watches the horrible scene right in front of him. The aggressor then asks if he is the mutant and says he came here on his own. Even after being beaten, the protagonist's hand is on the ground, covered in blood. Suddenly, the blood on the ground starts to move on its own and is drawn to his hand. The henchman notices something strange and is confused by what he's seeing happen there. And in the blink of an eye, the young man lands a powerful punch on the surprised aggressor's face. The young man dodges the attacks and lands a punch on another aggressor who flies far away. In seconds, he takes down several henchmen, leaving everyone shocked by his strength. The boss and his partner watch the fight from a distance, not believing what they are seeing. Kim Ji-ho then gets up and faces the rest of the gang with a cold and determined look. One of the men shouts furiously for his companions to finish him off at once. Surrounded from all sides, another henchman yells for them to mess him up without mercy. With that, the aggressors attack him together with bats and other weapons to take him down. But the protagonist fights back and lands a powerful kick on one of them, who flies through the air. With his precise blows, he takes down the aggressors, who scream in pain on the ground. Without wasting time, the boy lands a powerful punch on another henchman's face. He then does a spinning kick and takes down another one of the men who attacked him. With a serious look, he prepares to face the rest of the remaining henchmen. A masked man approaches from behind with a bat for a surprise attack. The young man dodges at the last second, but the bat ends up tearing his clothes and injuring him. With a quick movement, he dodges and prepares to counter-attack the aggressor. The protagonist hits him with a punch so strong that it throws him against the wall with full force. The remaining henchmen are terrified and wonder if he is even a human being. Kim Ji-ho then grabs another aggressor by the neck with an intimidating look on his face. Seeing the scene, the henchman with a man bun yells for his men to attack him with a knife. He says the young man is just a human, and if he's hit with a knife, he'll go down. The aggressor strikes him with the knife and asks if the blow hurt as it should have. Even coughing up blood, the protagonist stares at the ground without showing much pain. Furious, the man attacks him again and yells for the monster to be done for once. But suddenly, the young man grabs the aggressor's hand and stops him from attacking anymore. The henchman is completely confused because the boy doesn't seem to feel any pain. With a cold look, Kim Ji-ho tells the man to stop attacking him with that knife. Without any difficulty, he then takes the knife from the surprised aggressor's hand. Terrified, the man asks what kind of monster he is for not feeling the blows. Holding the weapon, the young man stares at him with a cold look and questions him. He then says the man doesn't need to know and strikes him in the leg with the knife. Seeing the scene, the other henchmen despair and decide to flee from that place. One of them throws his weapon on the ground and runs in fear of what might happen to them. But the protagonist moves at high speed and prevents the men from escaping. With his red eyes, he warns them that now they know his secret identity. Therefore, the young man states with a dark look that no one will leave there alive. Meanwhile, Little Fry just barks happily, not understanding any of the commotion, and so, the boy defeats the henchmen who are left on the ground, badly injured. The protagonist then stands amidst the bodies with an expression of victory. Taegu calls his name, and the young man turns to face him with a serious look. Worried, the bully asks if he's okay and says he'll call an ambulance. Kimjio says he's perfectly fine as the wound on his chest disappears. The bully is shocked to realize the protagonist's wound has completely vanished. He can't believe what he's seeing and is paralyzed with fear at the scene. With a sweaty face, he looks away and feels guilty for everything that happened there. The young man then apologizes to the bully, who is still on the ground, not understanding. Taegu then clenches his fist tightly, feeling like a complete idiot for everything. He starts hitting himself and curses himself for choosing the wrong friends and being an idiot. Confused, the protagonist asks why he would try to sell a friend like that. The aggressor apologizes and confesses that he betrayed him because he was close to those bad guys. He explains that he thought it was cool to hang out with them, and now sees himself as a thug just like them. The protagonist then holds out something to the bully, who is confused by the gesture. With that, he points out that the aggressor's nose is bleeding and tells him to clean his face. The bully asks if that's really for him, and the young man nods. But he realizes it's a puppy pee pad and gets very annoyed. Still, he cleans his face and hears the young man say that he doesn't deserve to be a friend. Kimjio smiles and says he wasn't the only one to consider them friends, and that's enough. The bully is speechless and just stares at him with the pee pad on his face. Suddenly, the aggressor starts to cry, moved by the protagonist's words. He then hugs Kimjio tightly and cries loudly, apologizing for everything he did. Amidst the fallen bodies, he says the protagonist is a really cool guy.